Hello, and welcome to the It's Okay to Say podcast. Hello, and welcome everyone. Welcome to our second podcast. So we had a lot of good sort of success, I guess, and positive feedback from the first one. And I thought we'll kind of carry on with that theme as well. So for today's kind of podcast, we're looking at it from two different avenues. One is looking at, well, why does work feel so intense right now? And not just only from clients and from people that we work with, but also from us as a therapeutic stance. Why does work feel so much more intense for us as therapists as well? And what kind of barriers and challenges have we been facing as well? And I guess it's a time to kind of for us to be open and honest and kind of, dare I say, humanize therapists in a way, shall we say. And the second part is also looking at, well, why, looking at AI and how it's integrates into therapy. So obviously the AI boom is still ongoing, a lot of concerns and people getting worried about AI and is going to come in and replace jobs. And I guess it's also important for us to kind of address and maybe look at how has AI been helping us out as therapists. And there's the possible risk of AI taking our jobs, quote unquote, shall we say. And what kind of barriers or thoughts or challenges do we have in that sense? So going back with our initial theme. Why does work feel so intense right now? And obviously, would like to welcome Adam to the group. He's our newest attendee, shall we say? I mean, have you got any kind of thoughts you want to share, Adam?
On why work feels so intense. Yes. So I think, well, given responses from clients a lot of the time, I think especially dealing with work stress and things like that, one of the biggest additives has definitely been the financial situation. People's economical situation is really impacting on or changed the mindset in work, I would say, in terms of where we maybe used to have like a career path that we're kind of working our way up to. It can feel a little bit now like we're just surviving, keeping ourselves in the job so that at this risk, this potential future risk, this stress of what might happen if I don't have this job, everything goes wrong. So there's this kind of consistent sense of snowballing, I suppose that you could say. From a therapist perspective, I suppose it is the intensity of it, isn't it? It's helping people to manage situations which in reality might not change. So the way in which work is now presenting itself. So now it's very goal driven and tick boxes and make sure you're reaching these targets and all of these different things. It creates a natural stress. So one thing is to say, if you're feeling stressed, have a bath. Another thing is, will a bath remove this natural everyday thing that's going to be there all the time? So I suppose for me, it's adjusted how I might manage coping mechanisms moving forwards. It's around acceptance and things like that, rather than just kind of breathing and anxiety reduction and things like that. There's more depth to it in that respect.
No, I do agree with that, and I think I'm going to sort of piggyback off that, and hopefully not try to put words in your mouth, but I'm kind of also, one of my pet peeves from a therapeutic stance is that sense of toxic positivity. Always try and be positive, always try and do something to give you that sense of being or whatever it is. But I mean, sometimes if a situation is bad, it is bad. That there isn't always going to be a silver lining, something good about it. But I think it's also about that stance of, okay, well, you've gone through it. How are you going to work through it? How are you going to manage through it? And I think there is also that stance where some therapists aren't fully too sure as well how to deal with certain challenges or barriers. So, I mean, given the economic instability right now, people worrying about work, about jobs, the conflicts of war, what can we really do as therapists to kind of be like, I'll be all right, I'm sure it's not going to be too bad, because at the same time we ourselves are in the same predicament. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think it's more about helping people to kind of understand that they're not the only ones, they're not alone.
Normalization.
Yeah, and I think it is that kind of sense. It's about normalizing that, yeah, it is kind of crap at the moment. It is a bit worrisome, it is a bit unstable. But at the same time, you're not the only one in the same boat. And you are surrounded by other people who have a similar kind of mindset and in a similar predicament. So I guess, as you said, normalizing for it. But what about you, Jonathan? Anything you kind of want to add or you thought about this?
But thank you, Alex. Quite a few things have come to mind from that. Again, I'm probably just going to echo what Adam said, and actually in part what you said as well. It's that all these things are happening in the world, and myself and my peers, we're not immune to it. You know, we are affected by that as individuals, as people as well. So we are in the same boat. And there's a really interesting story I could share behind this. So my niece was born 3 years ago, and kind of as a delayed gratification present, I set up an email account for her, which I'm glad I did, because it was able to use only her first name and last name. Didn't need any other additions because it never existed. So but when she's old enough, she can actually have a very nice professional email that hasn't been riddled with spam. So I've started emailing her in hopes that down the line she could kind of have something to reflect on. And one of the first emails I wrote was, "What's been happening when you were born?" And during that time, that list was very extensive. I remember talking about, we just came out of a pandemic. There is, war happening with Ukraine at the time. It still is. There's now tensions in the Middle East. For some, it might be more important, but the Queen also passed during the last couple of years. We've gone through more than one recession. She's gone through more than one recession in her current lifetime, and that's probably not all of it either. So it's just trying to just capture like that's just been happening for everyone in such a short period of time, and what that means for us as individuals, but even as a community and a society. I think very specific to the question you raised about how it kind of ties or comes in shown in therapy. One that came up in my mind was, I think, expectations. The world has changed, times have changed, and I think there is some sense of still conforming to maybe more traditional expectations. And I've had many conversations, whether in a therapist capacity, in a brother capacity, in a friend capacity, but I think it should be accepted that at this time, we can't do the same with what our parents did. I couldn't get a house at the age of 20. I didn't marry at the age of 20. I didn't start having children at the age of 20. I think, again, coming back to Adam's point, how the work dynamic has shifted as well. We're entering a stage where people can make money online. People can make money by sharing videos, by blogging, influencing. So the world has changed, and whether those norms have kind of adapted with that, I feel as something has probably coming into that work.
I think that something that I was thinking as well as you were talking, Jonathan, first of all, very heartwarming what you did for you. But I was thinking on when we started this podcast that the first thought was exactly that, how much things have changed. And actually what you were saying, Adam, how multi-layered the issue is, that somebody might be coming with this presenting issue, and this presenting issue is reflected to all of our lives as well, like economical issues, but is further pressurized by society in general. That actually this is not just a person issue. Even in our work, I think we might be listening to so many people, and we will hear the same thing, and it's kind of like it's reflected in very different levels. That there is not just your anxiety, but your anxiety is part of this system that is just reflected in this emotion, and is heightened. But actually is. It makes absolute sense that you be feeling like that, because there is so much news around, almost like news terrorism, that and I think our first topic connects to the second one, because there is so much that is created with this I guess future terror around AI, that it plays out to the present, and although there is so much, as you said, Jonathan, opportunity, it can feel like the opposite. Can feel like the opportunities are closing down on people, and what is being told is like, you can do anything you like, and you can make so much, and but it's not as straightforward as that. Yeah.
No, but it's almost kind of like a lack of control. And we've worked with people for many years, and we know that control plays a very important factor when it comes to working with human behavior. And obviously, as you mentioned, Giorgio, is everyone's getting crumpled in, everyone's possibilities of opportunities getting more narrowed down, and obviously with that sentiment stability that exists, it's almost like you have that always on fight or flight. Your nervous system is always predicting, always assuming something's going to happen, because something really is, given the circumstances. And if you watch the news and the media and stuff like that, there's always something going on. There's always something happening. And at that point, yes, you can become desensitized. But do you want to be desensitized to anxiety? Do you want to be desensitized to always being in fight or flight? And then given the fact that, again, us as therapists, we're also in the same kind of boat, there's also a possible risk of us also having burnout. Feeling like, well, it's the same story again. We're also going through these challenges. And what advice can I give to someone if I'm in the exact same position? And it kind of creates a sense of imposter syndrome, makes you feel kind of inadequate, or just adds that kind of sense of burden as well. So again, there is that kind of challenging barrier, because fundamentally speaking, is that it is going to be an ongoing issue, shall we say, unfortunately. But what are your thoughts, Yasmin?
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of your thoughts basically, but on toxic positivity especially, I feel like resilience language is helpful until it becomes a way of dismissing genuine stress, because, like you all mentioned, we're all in the same boat and we are stressed. There's a lot of uncertainty going on. And, when we speak to our clients, usually we share some of those uncertainties, some of those stresses. So, I mean, when we work, for instance, with gratitude journaling and, everything we recommend, I sometimes, as a therapist, when I find myself not practicing those. And, sometimes maybe we don't have to practice those because, it's a legitimate reason why we're stressed, right? And sometimes I think it's really important to acknowledge that and allow ourselves to feel stressed and, sit with that uncertainty for a while, because it sometimes even is annoying when someone says, oh, just be grateful, think positively, what are the pros? And like that can get really, annoying, really.
It can become quite mundane and quite repetitive and monotonous, because you sort of start to kind of believe in your own lies in that sense. Again, as Jonathan was mentioning, the world is adapting, and the world is changing, and certain things that were, I guess, a norm 20, 30, even 40 years ago are now starting to become a gradual and a big intimidating shift, shall we say. So again, it also comes down to a lack of purpose or identity. Some people kind of feeling stuck. I guess a good example is, we spoke about last time, where how many of us were kind of the old school therapists. We met in person, we did therapy face to face, and then we transitioned and shifted to doing online. So we had to kind of adapt and learn to kind of deal with things, especially during COVID time, because isolating, having to work remotely. So all of us had to understand how to use tech, how to use technology, how to adapt laws and legislation in order for therapy sessions to be ethical. So again, some people, and I guess we all know this, change is a scary thing, and human nature by default is quite habituated. So obviously, embracing a sense of change can be quite a challenge. And obviously, if that change is unpredictable or uncertain, those challenges become heightened, because again, there is no, I guess, formal security. So everyone was kind of worrying about, well, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen tomorrow? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. And if I may as well, with Yasmin's point around like a toxic positivity and strength and resilience and things like that, I think that it's the word resilience in a workplace can easily be turned into how much can you take without complaining. That is kind of a newer version of what resilience is in a business, which is horrible but true. It is essentially like it's reversed, isn't it? It's put back on the staff member themselves to look after themselves. Like, you need to be doing better at looking after yourself. I can even give a personal example of this when in previous roles I've had. I was struggling with something. I raised it with, it was actually how I was being managed, and I raised it with my manager, and I explained that how, the impact it was having on me, and how every day was kind of changing for me, making it more complicated. And every single recommendation back to me was what was it about me that I needed to change in order to feel more comfortable with the way that they worked, you know? And I think that is, again, it's like pushing resilience back on the staff member, not acknowledging your own like problems and what might need to be I hope I'm making sense here, but it's like I think quite often with clients as well, we hear the same thing, you know, what is it, you know, go see the mental health first aider as soon as they have even the mildest of problems. If it's mental health related, go see the mental health first aider quick as you can. You know, it's quite scary, I think, to approach the topic of mental health generally in the workplace for many managers. And I think that's perhaps that just comes from not being educated in it. I don't know. Yeah.
You know,
that makes me think of the of how, you know, Alex, you described like how much change, and you said, Jonathan, how much change like throughout the last few decades we are going through, and how little change actually we're maybe in every level people are demanded to have. You know, you just need to change, but also there is kind of very little relational change of like adaptation to the demands that people have, because there are so many demands externally. It almost feels like, based on in your story, Adam, that is pushed back on you to just make the change for everyone else.
What Adam said about the work culture, I feel like it's also related to our personal lives and downtime, right? You know, like even when we're relaxing, like we're actually trying to do something productive, you know, because we feel guilty. Oh, like I just sat on the sofa for an hour, like, you know, what a horrible thing to do. Like, you know, for instance, I've done like a free diving course last weekend, and I was like congratulating myself, you know, like, see, like that's a weekend well spent. But actually, like if I binge watch something, maybe I needed that. But I feel like, you know, that always on culture also, you know, burn ourselves, you know.
I mean, you actually do make a good point that there is. I mean, we can pretty much all count, you know, how many times we worked with clients where they'll always compare themselves with others, saying, oh, there's people my age or my peers doing this, doing that. You know, they've settled down, they've got this going on. And it's always that kind of competition that kind of exists, but it's more like toxic competition. It's almost like, you know, looking over other people's fences going, oh, well, they've got this, they've got that. Why am I not in this position? What do I need to do? And it's almost, I mean, any form of competition can be healthy. But when it becomes an obsession to the point that you start to feel guilty of just taking care of yourself or just having a bit of downtime, that starts to cause a bit of a concern, a bit of an issue. But it also kind of adds a borderline element of a hidden layer of grief. Changes in structure, changes in routine, that elements of stability, the career progression. You know, a very good example is I'm working with a client right now who kind of feels stuck. He's like, well, I've done this, I've worked here, I've progressed up the career ladder, but
you know,
I can't go anywhere else. What do I do? You know, I've got my peers who are working in senior roles and stuff like that, but why not me? And it's almost like that kind of element where it's a spotlight hypothesis. Given the fact that we live in an internet world, everyone's comparing themselves, looking on social media, it creates that false sense of illusion that everyone's successful, everyone's doing something.
And everyone shares positives, right? No one shares their struggles, so we think everyone's lives are much better than ours. And I guess that ties back to what Jonathan said, right? You know, all the expectations, like, oh, my parents were, you know, working in a really good job when they're in their mid-20s, or, you know, like they had it all figured out when they're in their 20s. But it's that comparison, old versus new. You know, when
I'd like to add to that one now as well, as now that I'm an adult, I'll say it that way, but there was a time I remember that once I hit the age that my parents had me, my perspective really changed. In that I now started reminding myself, so for example, right now at my age, if I was my parents, I would have 11, 12-year-old son, I would have a 7-year-old daughter, and like a 4-year-old younger son. And, you know, I'm just thinking to myself, how would I do that right now, right as I am now? And it's a helpful reminder just to give myself that my parents weren't all knowing, perfect. They did what they did at the time, and that's what I'm doing now. But I also think there is an individual perspective to it, just kind of coming back to what Yasmin and Alex said, that, just using your example, Yasmin, freediving, I could not think of anything I'll be on the top of the list of something I don't want to do. After doing that, I am drained and my week will start off quite bad. I do, however, can see myself just having a binge watch at home on the weekend, and that will recharge my batteries for the week. And what I really want that to be taken out of was, I don't think there is no right or wrong way. It has to be very individual. For some, doing one activity is going to be more energizing and recharging than others. And I think it's always important to hear, like, you're not expected to go, everyone should be expected to go out for a walk and feel better from that. So I think it has to be knowing that there is an individual element, and that comes down to that person to be able to kind of recognize what it is that they need for themselves. And if I may, the other one that came up for me was when you asked the question about therapists. I think a theme was emerging from all our conversations around the exposure of information out there, but also whether that information provides an answer or just leaves us more in the unknown. And one of the examples that came up to my mind was, I guess in my work, I will find myself working with clients who recently have experienced something or from a recent event. But in addition to that, actually people who are now finally seeking help. So I can give examples where I've had clients who are finally ready to, who are now coming in to work on something that's happened maybe 10, 20, even 30 years ago. And, I think there was a lot more stigma back then, as there is still some stigma carrying now. I think we're moving into a place where actually awareness is getting stronger and better. And from that, actually, has meant more clients are becoming aware of themselves, and then kind of seeking support, which I think is a great sign. But obviously what that has meant for us is that we're now receiving a much higher demand. But that was definitely something that came to my mind, was also just how that kind of information, what that might mean for people, and then where then that dribbles into other areas with others.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think there's a lot of kind of reflective feedback here as well. I mean, I think the important part is that there's never a right or wrong way for how you cope and manage deal with things. Just because one method might be suitable for you doesn't mean it's applicable to everyone else. And I think there is having a way of a healthy way of just not so much dissociating from the world, but just sort of recharging and recuperating. So I guess an example is a couple of weekends ago, I decided to go and climb Mount Snowdon up in Wales after a long, treacherous 8 hours and regretful waste down of pain and agony of nothing moving or working. Yeah, it was nice and it was great, and then there was that kind of form of relief. But I know a lot of people are not going to be willing to do an 8-hour hike in jeans and a t-shirt. That was my accomplishment. With a backpack and rain. But to others, for example, I'm a big fan of gaming, so I do like the occasional evening where I just sort of detach and escape into a digital world. That's my way of recharging and then feeling quite good and happy with that. So I think it's about understanding that it's not so much about the methods you utilize, but how did they help you and benefit you? And more importantly, it's about whether they actually give some form of benefit and purpose to you as well. And it's not about talking about, being in denial about it. This is applicable not to just clients, but also to us as therapists. There has to be a healthy output when you comes to deal with things. And obviously we have our supervisions, we have our discussions, and then we kind of share and talk about common themes and patterns. But, as you talk about, Adam, it's the term resiliency has changed drastically, especially in the corporate stance. But the element of resiliency by meaning is how you cope and deal with things, how you kind of look for a different angle and different perspective, and how you deal with it to the point that you minimize having that kind of element of burnout. I think that's a lot more reflective for us as therapists. And I think it is also kind of our duty and our responsibility to kind of psychoeducate and to kind of go above and beyond that kind of corporate lingo and actually use, I guess, more of the humanist language, humanist approach when it comes to it.
Absolutely.
Just one more to add was, so I'm just picking up off what Yasmin said. There sometimes feels like there is an overlap. And I guess for me, there was the difference between coping and hiding. And I think that was kind of subtly coming out of the conversation that there should be a significant difference between the two. And we're talking about in a way of coping, but for some, it can almost feel like it's doing it just to hide the problem, which, to your point, isn't going to address it.
Someone said the word needs as well, and I mean, I bring that word into pretty much client, but client's needs, what client need in order to feel in some way better, let's go sometimes. But also reflecting on something else that Jasmine said around, feeling guilty about doing the things that actually make you feel relaxed or calm, which is just yet another layer of having a thing you have to work through with a client, which is getting to the bottom of that. My parents were always up and out doing the garden, cutting the grass, doing something. And now when I sit down, I'm just there's no one here, but I'm waiting for someone to go, what are you doing sitting down? You need to, even that, it's establishing, okay, well, this is a need of yours. This is a thing that works for you, and feeling okay with that is equally as important. But it's really important that, yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's also important to kind of be understanding reflective. I mean, I know one of my symptoms of when I start to near burnout is that I'll start to feel guilty about relaxing and just not doing anything.
Yeah.
So that for me, that's an early indicator for myself that I know that I need to kind of step in and actually do something to kind of relax and take that back. Because, but why do we need to feel guilty about doing nothing? Why do we need to feel guilty about having some downtime? So, is that a social norm? Is that a societal norm? Is that peer pressure? Is that something else that's been educated into us? Or as you were saying, Adam, like, for example, my grandparents coming from Ukraine and Eastern Europe, always out and about, get up at 5:30 in the morning, go to the stables, feed the farm animals, work fields and the crops, all this sort of stuff. So, from 5:30 to about 6:30, 7 in the evening, you're on your feet, you're doing things. But, as we all were talking, as Jonathan mentioned, but the world has changed. Everything's adapted, we've become more digitalized. And I think it's also important to understand that there is a form of digital fatigue that exists as well, that we need to start to understand and incorporate and find ways to manage and balance out as well.
And I think especially us as therapists, like working online, as absolutely loads of pros, but also, when it comes to socializing with your colleagues, actually like taking a break and, having a lunch with someone, not only talking to your client, I think is missing, and I think that's really important that, I sometimes come to realize, because, I only talk to my clients all day, sometimes I don't, talk to any of my colleagues, if I don't have a supervision or a meeting that day. And I think, finding that right balance is also important.
No, I definitely agree there. No, I can definitely agree there. But, right. Is there any kind of last thoughts or feedback before we start to kind of wrap up this topic for the first half hour? Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been quite good. Yep.
Okay. If I may as well, sorry, I know I said it, and apologies for bringing this up now, but if I do need to go, I might just need to disconnect, if that's okay. I don't want to interrupt the flow if we are still going towards 2:00. That's all.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, that was a very good interactive first kind of elements. A lot of strong kind of feedback. And I think it kind of does apply a bit more of a kind of a self-help guide, shall we say, what we were talking about as well. So that's quite reflective, quite useful. I think so. The second part is I think a little bit more juicy. Talking about AI and its integration into therapy. I mean, I'm gonna pick on Giorgio here. When we do talk about AI, what are your thoughts about AI in therapy? What kind of comes to your mind initially?
A lot. I think my thoughts throughout the first conversation have been very much focused on that second topic. I see a lot of the current, I guess the current like challenges at work related to AI, and when I think of AI, actually the first thought is the impact that currently has in the news and society and my friend groups, and almost everything that I read daily and I hear is one third of the news always around the development of AI, the AI bubble, AI companies, AI usage. If I want to write an email that is a little bit more complicated, or I need a little bit of guidance or advice, where do I go anymore? I go to AI. I'll use an LLM. And it has very quickly infiltrated almost every part of my life and every part of a conversation. Very, very quickly, very sneakily, that I was I guess that like close to one of my favorite my favorite things to do is to write, and even now taking the time to write is like something that I really need to put effort in creating the time, because I can do it so quickly by just dumping all my thoughts and saying, organize this for me. And so I'm it's like it's got a convenience and a thief at the same time. And
Sure.
And I guess it's we're at such early stage still in all this AI boom and integrating it into our life, but like us integrating it into its development, that I'm still finding hard to make my mind around it, and I sometimes find myself going very much on the side of like doom and gloom with AI, and I definitely ascribe to a lot of ideas around the challenges with where AI can take our professional lives, and not just us as therapists, but like everyone else as well, and how that will affect us and our clients. But also to like relationships, ideas, and yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys think about? Do you think AI is going to be a good addition, a backing tool for therapy? Or do you think it's going to be more of its downfall and pitfall, or is it more dependent on how it's utilized?
This is a really big thing for me, AI nowadays, because my PhD is on this. Developing a mental health app for economic migrants is my topic. But myself and my supervisor, everyone is trying to make sure that you find the right balance between AI and human. Because especially as therapists, I think our job is very relational. So how can a robot or artificial intelligence can replace us? So I think when it comes to journaling and like 24/7 support type of thing, more like a reflection space, I think it's quite helpful. Even I'm using it sometimes, when I'm frustrated, like instead of like old school journaling, I talk to AI sometimes, and it can be a really good reflection space. But when I'm thinking about the development of my project, I always think that there needs to be a real human being involved in it. We can't really just rely on artificial intelligence. I think it's not really reliable yet. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but
I mean, do you think? Go on, Jojo.
A very quick note, which is an experience that I had in the past 3 weeks, which I've never had before, was more and more. At this point, I have been 5 instances where clients have been coming to therapy, and they're like, "Well, I have already everything that I've been having problems with, and let me read it out from ChatGPT, and here is the take," and they will narrate this kind of very elaborate diagnosis of their experience, and it's been quite jarring to hear. But also I've been quite open, because I'm also very curious to hear right, what does that mean for you? Why would you tell me via this, and not just let yourself share this. So yeah, that was a good comment that I thought that it's been very interesting what you said, Yasmin.
I mean, kind of adding on to that, I was kind of thinking just now is that what are the expectations of AI in therapy? Can they actually reinforce negativities, or can it be a positive element? What I'm trying to mean by this is, what if we were to have some kind of sophisticated LLM that can kind of help with dealing with mental health concerns, like phobias, for example? Can that then reinstill a sort of discomfort with people talking to other people? And then they start to become a bit more comfortable talking to artificial intelligence to the point that they start to depend on it more. So then talking to a human being is another barrier.
Well, to your original question and point as well around how it's used and in what context, I think that's ultimately a really important thing, because it's in certain ways AI can be useful in the middle of the night when someone is in some kind of a crisis and they type something in, I'm really not feeling myself, or whatever that might be. It just goes, ring this number, ring that number, do this, do that, and it can inform someone very, very quickly, or even help them just to kind of breathe and to go through something. There are positives there in that, but it's also, I suppose, if you look at it from a more long-term perspective, there's different types of AI that do different things. Ones that remember previous conversations you've had, kind of develop almost a personality with you, which are the less monitored ones. They're definitely more complicated in nature and more risky, I would say, because essentially the AI doesn't know you, it predicts you. Therefore, its advice is biased based on the information that it can access. So it's never going to give you the human understanding or the uncomfortable truth of what's going on in the background in your mind and things like that. So from a very kind of open access therapist, if it's trying to make it a therapist, I think it's a million miles away from healthy, I think. But for things like note taking, much like Giorgio was saying there, to a certain degree, it can be a bit strange to see this. Suddenly it pumps out this whole thing and you go, my goodness me, like look what it's picked up on. Sometimes it gets it wrong. We used a system called Heidi in a previous role, which is literally just that. It just gives you a single document with all of the points made. It would miss risk, certain tonality, gestures, different things that it doesn't see, and the things that people might say, it takes as a nothing, like, sometimes I just wish I wasn't here. It just thinks it means in your bedroom. It doesn't think you mean on Earth, like it's making assumptions on what that sentence means. And so you then have to reread that and go, oof, didn't catch really important thing there, and that in itself tells me that a human has to be involved, certainly at this point, whatever that means. Until we start being able to upload consciousness, I don't know. Yeah.
And on that note, before I forget, after you talk at like that made me think, like ChatGPT or any type of like artificial intelligence. I feel like it almost always agrees with you.
Oh, always, yeah.
I think that's a very good point that you made, because you can't really rely on it solely, because if you're in time of crisis, maybe if it's something extreme, then it may not agree with you. But I'm probably you also in the news that someone ended their lives because of GPT and his conversations with it. So I guess like it's like George just said, like you can't really rely on it fully, but it can help you to organize your thoughts maybe. And it can at times help the therapist, to understand even. But I guess like you need to use it right. But how are we gonna trust everyone, all clients or even ourselves, that we're using it right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess not to sort of jinx anything or anything like that, but I kind of feel like, for being a therapist and therapy and psychology, AI is the least likely thing to take over the field, because the way I see AI, it's almost like a psychological mirror. It just reflects exactly what you say to it. Now, us as therapists, we don't mirror what our clients say. If anything, we try to give them a different perspective, we try to give them different ideas, we challenge them. Now, I don't think AI and LLMs are there yet, and I don't think they'll dare to kind of do that, because unless it's very sophisticated, and unless it's learned, has a large data set. But at the same time, not to go a little bit sort of existential here, but how can a machine understand emotions when emotions can't be quantified? When behavior is hard to understand.
Yeah, and like on that note, I feel like everyone's emotions are unique. Like even if there's loads of millions and millions of data, like I can be diagnosed with ADHD, but my experience might be different from someone else's ADHD experience. So like even if there's data, how is it going to be personalized? Unless that person maybe continuously talk to that.
Yeah, because like if you look at PTSD, for example, or trauma, how is the AI supposed to understand that's when, in simple terms, a form of PTSD is a memory problem. It hasn't been processed. So how is an AI supposed to help you process a memory if it doesn't understand what it is in a nutshell to begin with? Shall we say?
Well, yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And things like psychosis, clarifying if something's there and things like that. I can see this thing in the room, but I'm not sure if it's there. Is it going to say it's not? Is it going to say it is? Is it going to reaffirm that that's true? Because like you say, they do tend to agree with you. The kind of open joke really is that's the best idea you've ever had. Like every sentence it starts with when you ask it a question is, what a great this, what a great that, I wonder how it might work in those respects as well in terms of, things that you cannot prove.
Yeah, its job is to people please, but I don't think us as therapists, that's our role. Our role is to help give an ulterior perspective, follow it in a healthy way, want to look at different ideas and help you to also reflect and learn. And I don't think an AI will be able to do that, at least not yet. But I personally don't think it ever will be able to. But it can be used as a tool, for example, getting feedback, or even using it as a AI supervisor, something like that. For example, if you're stuck with a client, having barriers, it can be quite useful in giving a different perspective. And information of what a protocol is, for example, that can be quite useful. But I think the other barrier, the other worrisome thing is because we're in this AI bubble, as Giorgio was saying, people become overly dependent on it. So again, where do the ethics come in? How do we process this information? How is sensitivity stored? How is data processed? If we're getting essentially another pair of eyes to look at it, would we ourselves be comfortable for an AI to look at our profile, what we are, and what we reveal secretly and personally to people?
Yeah. I think AI itself should actually suggest these in-person activities or, social situations. Like going back to my project, I'm trying to develop a culturally tailored, personalized mental health intervention for economic migrants. So like that cultural tailoring, I'm thinking to involve like a lot of like signposting, like, like there's this running club nearby, why don't you go there? Or like, what are your hobbies? So like signposting you to relevant, personal and in-person real life things. So I think that's the most important thing, to include that in the AI, because if you can get that suggestion from it, then maybe balancing it might be a bit easier.
I think that's the key word there. How do we balance AI with therapy? And I think even nowadays, realistically, I think AI has been around for what, a year and a half, 2 years, give or take, that we've all started to really heavily kind of start using it. But I still think AI is trying to find its own place and footing in the world, where it belongs, where it fits in. I think everyone's just quite excited and keen to trial it out and see how it works. Well, I think the next few years we'll definitely start to see where they're going to have the pros and cons.
And one last thing as well on that, I think, because I feel like I've brought lots of negatives, I don't think AI is necessarily an entirely negative thing. There are definitely positives to it, and some of those, from a therapist perspective, or certainly if you're working within an organization, then something which is quite practical, of course, is an attachment, for instance, connecting the AI to all of your policies and things like that. And say you're in the middle of having a client and they bring something up and it makes you go, I think I might need to follow a process here. Can I now remain with the client and stay fully contacted with them while I'm doing this down the policy? Or can I do a quick sentence in a little AI thing here and say, this client said this, this, and this, and hit enter, and it reads all my documents and it says, here's what you need to be doing. And I can remain with the client, potentially keeping them in a safe space as well, and access this information quickly without having to distance myself too far from that. So that's an enormous benefit. That's a very smart tool that can pick that out for you. And it's
Yeah. And one thing before I forget also, I mean, I think it's really helpful for people who cannot access therapy, because, we know the waiting times and everything, and, it can be a good starting point for some people.
Yeah, I mean, it can be used as a potential filter to kind of sort of organize and orchestrate sort of higher risk and stuff like that. So when you've been quite quiet, pondering and thinking, so wondering what's
I think a lot of people said some good things, and really feeling my age when I'm going to say, I felt one thing that came to me is like, kids with these days will never know what it was like going through uni or studying without AI.
Yeah.
Just imagine what life would have been like back then if we had AI then. But I kind of, actually, a lot of what everyone says resonates with me. I think it's here to stay. I don't think it's leaving. It's integrated in almost everything now. I've seen it. I would see it in YouTube. I'll see it in Spotify. I've seen it on, dating apps, booking.com. It's just everywhere and everywhere, anywhere and everywhere now. So I'm kind of taking more of an approach of it's here to stay. So not so much as resisting the change, but being part of the change to be positive in a more positive way. And this kind of ties back to probably our earlier discussion around change as well. Therapy itself has changed. It's 30 years ago, it was the more iconic someone lying down on a sofa. Well, more that Freudian way of working. And then we moved into face-to-face sessions. It was no longer psychologists. We had counselors, we had therapists. And then, as you said, we also moved into remote therapy. And then somewhere along the way, people were doing dictations, then we're doing note taking, then we stopped doing note taking, and now we're back here. So I think there is that kind of also reflects just how it's adapting within therapy itself. I do have some reservations naturally, and there are some good and some positives and some cons with it. But I think, again, tying back to the first one, how it also relates back to work. I think with an AI bubble, that just has increased the expectations of organizations, companies, that everything should be much more efficient, quicker, hitting targets, less human errors because of AI. And then what does that mean for us? Where does it leave us? Just kind of having to hold on to that expectation. I think very specific to therapy, I have a lot of reservations just around the ethics of how it's going to be fully integrated. And I agree, I don't think it's going to fully replace it ever. Because it lacks the human connection, it lacks the relational way of working, it lacks compassion, empathy, and most above all, it's not accountable. Even if we had AI supporting us, if something, knock on wood, was to ever happen, it would still be us that's accountable. So we would still have to have that final decision, and so it can fit somewhere in the middle. I think where my comfortable place right now is it's not directly related with working someone. It's more in the background, whether it's more just tidying up, a bit of admin, a bit of organizing. The one that Adam mentioned probably sticks the most to me, which is just remembering something I couldn't remember. I think that's captured it quite well. That's professionally. Personally, it's very ingrained in my life.
Yeah.
Again, the way I do it, it's when I apply both sides, I don't try to get AI to do what I need it to do. I've adapted myself to work with what AI can actually do. So it's very minimal, but it is very ingrained. So I can give a couple of examples. Like if I'm going on holiday, I don't ask it to plan a route. I will say, these are the things I definitely want to do. Can you create a route that works around it without changing anything else? Or one of my favorites is probably around cooking. Like I know enough about cooking and what's in my house. Sometimes I forget what's left around. So occasionally I would always ask it, like, right, I still have these leftovers. What can I make out of it so I don't waste food? And it will tell me, it'll create 1 or 2 recipes what I can do with that, and then it might even say, if you still have it, do you still have that tin of beans from the other day? I was like, I actually forgot about that. I could have actually made another meal out of that. So it's, yes, personally, it's quite ingrained in helping me just organize and manage my day-to-day stuff. I think on a professional level, I do carry some reservations, as I think quite a few people do. But I don't want that to overshadow that. I recognize it can help in other areas too.
I guess in a very kind of nice summary is that AI should be used, especially in the therapeutic stance, AI should be used as a tool, not as a dependence.
Yeah.
It can be a great asset to be utilized, but in a healthy, boundaried way.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the more important part, is that we've seen this time and time again where people heavily depend on it. So sort of relying on it to make decisions, for it to make judgment, for it to kind of make a form of decision, for it to be quite assertive. But that's never the point that AI was designed to be. It was primarily used to be a tool, as an aid, and help to make things a bit more efficient. So essentially, it's like an assistant, as a way to look at it. I mean, joking aside, you're not going to use your frying pan or your saucepan or your air fryer to be a therapist. But you're going to utilize it as a tool to help you out with something else, or whatever it might be. And I think that's what needs to be utilized here. AI needs to be seen as a tool, a useful resource, not something to be dependent on and to take away 100% from that sense of accountability, from that sense of responsibility and decision making. Instead, to help you to process things, to pick up things you might have missed out.
I think Georges and Yasmin made a really good point about how it can help. I think homework would be a really good example. Not school homework, therapy homework. School homework should always still be done by yourself. But, for example, when you have a particular kind of therapeutic worksheet, which does sometimes require a lot of deep reflections, I think combining that with an AI, so it knows it can only work with this structure, and it's kind of helping you prompt a bit more content out, but also organize your thoughts. That I can see. And I'll be curious to know if we ever do the same topic in 6 months' time, because it has changed in itself again.
That would be quite an interesting thing to explore, no doubt. But I guess kind of not to put a spotlight on anyone, but anyone here kind of intrigued or interested in how AI could be utilized from a therapeutic stance, or open-minded to using it?
I mean, fully, you mean, or partially, like we talked about?
I guess fully. So seeing if it can actually be somewhat autonomous in the therapeutic stance. Anyone quite intrigued to see how that could be utilized? If there is even a possibility for that to be utilized.
I think partly it...
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to drop off. So it's been lovely speaking with all of you, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
I think at least what I've seen with a few clients that I have currently, we're all using it daily, multiple times a day. They kind of either run, they're using like onboarding the LLM, and then they almost like have a little bit of an echo chamber discussion with themselves via the LLM, and I think they've said in some way to like balance them. What I've seen, which is basically this is a full-fledged type of a therapeutic relationship, attempted at least, or someone who is supporting you, always is there for you, is that they're creating a little bit of an echo chamber. They're talking about the same things. They're always ranting. They're always kind of pouring themselves when they feel overwhelmed, and then this is kind of reinforced by giving some solutions or giving some like bullet points of this is what you're experiencing, this is what is happening to you. And on one hand, it has been quite insightful because they are coming and they're like, this is all the insights that I have to share with you, but there is also a sense of impatience. This is like, I'm still there, like, here it is. I've told you everything. What are you going to do about it? And I found it very interesting to have these discussions, that it seems that, on the one hand, you're using this as a tool, but on the other hand, it despairs you a little bit that you're not exactly getting what you want out of it. And then, you're seeking for a sense of like resolve me a resolution, but it's not quite like that. And I guess that's what, at least me as a therapist, that's what I always experience in therapy, both as a professional and as a client. There isn't that kind of,
That's
resolution.
quite interesting, isn't it? Whether it's with a person or with AI, you kind of hit the same outcome, which is it's not going to be just a magic one fix. And I think that's quite key as well, because I think to Yasmin's example of that incident as well, it could be quite, we can be quite susceptible and influenced by it as well as it can be by us. And I think the most important part at the end of what Georgia said is how we use that information. So, I think for therapists, if we ended up using AI to that extent, we can still agree or disagree whether we think that's right or wrong. And for some, they might just fully embrace and accept what's just been said. But I think there is still an onus on the user, whether it's a client, a therapist, or whoever's using AI, to know that they can and should also challenge it if they feel it is wrong, and not just fully kind of embrace that that's kind of the Bible.
Well,
and also, I mean, going back to your original question, Alex, like using AI or a mental health app solely without a therapist, I think what's missing in the industry, or what I see is when an app is developed, it's solely like designers, like there's not many psychologists, like mental health professionals, like counselors, therapists helping the app developers. So I mean, if we're gonna even thinking about replacing therapists with AI, which I don't really believe is gonna happen, but even if that's the case, we need to involve us therapists in this process, because that will actually help with the safety, and that's the only way we can make sure that it's as safe as possible. But I've been intrigued to watch a session, like a client and an AI, but I personally don't think it's replaceable. It's human connection.
I don't think it ever will. It might be integrated, shall we say, but I think it's always still going to fundamentally be human-led.
Yeah.
I think a lot of useful sort of topics and things we spoke about today. Amy, go in your kind of last final thoughts about two things we spoke about.
No, it's been a great conversation, really. And AI is a very hot topic at the moment. So
I think it will be for quite some time in all fairness. But as Jonathan said, I think it'd be good to touch base on something similar like this again in about 6 months to a year and see what we think about it then. But to all the audience and everyone who's taken part and everyone who's listening as well, thank you very much for attending. And I guess to you guys as well, thank you very much for taking part and attending today. Always good to get kind of insights and feedback. And then stay tuned for the next one, I guess. And then we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.